Hello everyone and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Calling All Jews. So this one is called Timeline of the Resurrection, because it is. So interestingly enough, once I started this writing the class, this was actually supposed to be a Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. But the verse that we actually started with was regards to Israel actually dwelling in Egypt for 210 years. It sparked something in my brain because there's so much to say about this number, particularly end times, resurrection of the dead. And so now we're doing Calling All Jews because I know more people watch Calling All Jews than Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Although personally, I think Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer is more interesting because everything is in there and the extrapolation from all these things is Calling All Jews. But in any case, whatever works, I want this message to get out there. So please feel free to share this video. So about a month ago, I heard this drash. I don't know exactly who gave it because there was no name. It was like one of these anonymous things. But the person spoke of many things that I already know, just connecting certain dots and illuminating certain things that I would, let's say, otherwise not have noticed. This is exactly the same thing that we do in all these classes. Everything that I'm teaching from, I'm not making any of these things up. I'm saying I'm bringing all the sources, just connecting the dots for you. That's what we do. So like we said, there's nothing new under the sun. We just bring certain things to light, revealing a new way to look at things, giving us new understandings. So in this case, a date has actually been given for the resurrection of the dead. It is very cool. It's like, shut up. No, but really, all these other dates, as we see, they're all out there. And for centuries, millennia, people have been trying to figure it out. But because we're so close to the time of the end, it kind of takes away, by the process of elimination. We have this many years left, and therefore, all of a sudden, the relevant letters, words within these prophecies is starting to rise up, and we can have a very clear picture. We've never been this close to the end, right? By default. So here we are. So now, like all things, every date or case that is brought here, everything is subject to change. It's a biblical rule that the hastening or the delaying of the redemption is entirely in our hands. We do that, right? There is an end date, a point that it could never go beyond, and anything up until that, that's on us, right? For instance, what delays the redemption? When the Jews are not in Israel when they can be. It absolutely delays the redemption. How do we know? Again, just read through the Torah, everything in the Torah. But because God said, to simplify it, God said that he's going to gather the remnants from all the far corners of the earth. Meaning, Israel being in the land of Israel is part of the redemption process. When they choose not to be in the land, they are prolonging it. And those who are in the land have to hold down the fort with many losses, I might add. As a result of those who chose not to be in the land of Israel when they could have been, God says of them in Jeremiah 31:7-8, "Behold, I bring them from the north country and gather them from the utmost ends of the earth, the blind and the lame amongst them, the woman and the child, and she who travails with child altogether, a great company shall they return here." This is what I've heard from a lot of the Jews outside of it. Oh yeah, when God gives me, when Mashiach gives me the call. Wait. Now, as yourselves, those who chose to dwell outside the land of Israel, while your brethren are acting as cannon fodder, essentially. We're on the front lines over here. What state do you think that you are going to be in when somehow you are brought back here in the end? I'm talking about Jews, not the lost 10 tribes. That, again, you will be awakened when you are, and you will come back. I'm talking about Orthodox Jews who follow Torah, who continuously say, "I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt in order to be your God, and I need you to come into the land to do all these mitzvot." I'm talking about this specific group. So again, those who are not here, who somehow might survive to be brought back in that time, not because you're worthy, but for God's namesake. What does the next verse say in Jeremiah? With weeping they will come, and with supplications will I lead them. Why? Why with weeping and supplications? What are you lamenting over here? Because it hurts to lose your lifestyle and see disaster all around you. Oh, we built a life and all that stuff. Or, like we discussed in the very first Calling All Jews, the only reason, the true reason, and again, our sages write about this, and so do the prophets, the true reason that you are not here is because you do not want to give up the way you live and the money that you make and the comforts that you are used to. But honestly, between you and me, my understanding is that all those who really could not make it here, I get a lot of messages from people, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's okay. God doesn't see? It's not like, oh, I don't want to be caught on the outside. We're talking about God and his world. Nobody's going to be caught anywhere where you think you could slip by if you weren't supposed to slip by. Everything is going to be okay. Perfect judgment, perfect justice. Remember. So, like I said, my understanding, all those who could not be here, they're the ones who will be brought over, and everything is going to be good, while those who could have made it here, but chose not to, chose the world over Israel, could very well be taken out in the darkness, just as the Jews in Egypt were. The 80% of Israel who were snuffed out in the plague of darkness, they didn't worship idols, nor did they change their names or customs or dress. They were very distinctly different from the Egyptians. So then why were they removed from Klal Yisrael? Because they felt that they could be God-fearing Jews in Egypt / the world. Egypt is the world, right? And yet they were told, as we can read over and over again, I am the Lord your God who has taken you out of the land of Egypt in order to be a God to you. I will not be a God to you in Egypt because Egypt is impure. We don't have that connection. They chose to stay in Egypt and continued with their lifestyle. They did not make it out. Now, just think about that. Interestingly enough, I just read this. Actually, my wife read this to me. She's like, yeah, so did you see that 79% of American Jewry voted for that fool over there? I'm like, yeah, you may as well make it 80% and then we can round. That makes more sense. It's insane to me. But okay. What can we say? So again, just think about this situation. So now what can hasten the redemption? This we obviously want to know, right? Like we learned when Israel does tshuva. Barega shosim tshuva miyad nigalim. God redeems us immediately the moment Israel does tshuva. All of Israel does tshuva. And we're talking about Israel in the land of Israel, because you can't do tshuva not living in the land of Israel, specifically in the time of the redemption. This is not Chabad 30 years ago with the Rebbe. This is today in the absolute time of redemption, and a Jew who is not here, who calls himself a God-fearing Jew. Wow. I don't know. Again, we're looking at the numbers, and they're not favoring anybody outside of Israel, any God-fearing Jew. But that's the only way for things to get better and ease the birth pangs of Mashiach. This is tshuva, like we discussed in the last Calling All Jews. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very hard. But for the sake of the redemption, meaning that through the troubles and the fear that Israel will go through, they will do tshuva with God's help, of course. So, with all this in mind, let's get into it. This message is designed to strengthen our faith. How so? It's the difference between being a prisoner and being held captive. There's a difference. A captive is held in a dark hole, right? Like our peoples. Held in a dark hole and does not know if it is day or night, how long they're going to be there, if they'll even live or die. It's absolute hell, right? They know nothing, and everything about the scenario is designed to cause despair because they can see no signs and have nothing really to look forward to. I mean, they hope, but really, with that, I can't even begin to imagine. While a prisoner, what is a prisoner? A prisoner usually has a time of reference. Meaning, let's say a person goes to prison for, you got a 5-year stretch. They have a time, they have a date, they have something to look forward to. So they look forward to the release date, counting down the days, and as the time comes closer to the release date, they allow themselves to feel a little bit, to smell, to sense the outside even before they get there. It's something that gives you strength. Chazak ve'ematz. They have something very specific to look forward to as they see the end of the imprisonment and the beginning of freedom. The same can be said of a marathon runner, right? Who actually sees the finish line. As a result, they become even more focused and they become stronger and faster. However, Israel, we are a combination of those two, of both of them. Genesis 12:1. There we go. From this coming parsha, this Shabbat. And the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. That's it. In other words, go in that general direction. Start heading west and I'll let you know when to stop. That's all the information he got. The Jews of today would be like, well, can you tell me exactly where I'm going? What's the temperature over there? I need to know how to pack. How long am I going to have to be there until this inheritance you're talking about kicks in? What am I supposed to do while I'm there? Do they have Starbucks? If it doesn't work out, are you going to give me a refund? While a true Jew would do what their father Abraham did. And Abram went as the Lord spoke to him. Oh, that direction? Yes, sir. That's the direction I'm going in. It all worked out in the end, didn't it? God doesn't give us the entire plan because then where's your faith? Go there, I'll let you know what to do once you get there. Will you let me know right away or do I have to wait a little bit? Abraham did not speak until spoken to. He did not ask questions until information was given. He just did what God said, and it all paid off. Haloch tamim lefanai, walk innocently before me. In other words, do your thing. I'll let you know. I'll take care of everything. God is telling Abraham how to live. He's telling us how to live. He went from being a captive to a prisoner. In other words, I don't know. Oh, now I know. Here we go. Something to look forward to. This is what God does. But in the meantime, why is God silent? Because that builds up our faith. Faith in God that he's going to take care of us. And every single time it pays off. So what can we say about our situation today? No doubt we have been both captives and prisoners for the last 2,500 years since the destruction of the first temple. Like we said, the second temple was a shell of its former self. It did not have the Shechina, the Urim with Tumim, the fire coming down, consuming the altar, the offerings upon the altars, the smoke going straight up. It didn't have the Ark of the Covenant. It was a very beautiful building with no Kedusha. That's essentially what it was. So that's why we count from the time the first temple was destroyed. So though we have been given a release date, which is the end of the sixth millennia, right? The end of the 6,000 years. How long is that? That's 215 years from now. Just try and imagine 2,000 years ago when they're writing Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and all our fellows over there in the Talmud. Oh my goodness, how long the galut is. Rabbi Shimon would raise his hands and he would cry when he actually saw the kids got to wait for another 2,000 years. Moses was crying about it. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were crying about it. They prayed to strengthen us because of the long galut. Jacob wanted to tell his sons, let me tell you what's going to happen in the end of days. It was taken from him. Why? To strengthen our faith. Because if we're actually given a date from way back when, like we said, so not in my lifetime, I'll live okay. But now, what can we say now? Well, we know that it's actually in our lifetime. It's time to wake up, right? It's crunch time. So we've been given a release date, meaning the absolute latest that it could happen. That's 215 years from now. But if you've been paying attention to our previous classes in Calling All Jews, you will see it is way, way closer than that. Now, I got something even closer. However, we have also been given a chance at an early release, parole, right? Due to good behavior. So apparently we do indeed have an early release date regarding the resurrection of the dead. Resurrection of the dead is the final thing to happen, right? And this date just so happens to coincide with all the other dates that we have been given thus far. Check out the teaching on Daniel's timeline. Just watch the entire series. All this information pertains to us today. Please watch and share. This source comes from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, Zichron Tzadik Vekadosh Livracha. The Rebbe spoke about Mashiach ben David and the coming of the redemption without delay already in the year 1991, meaning he spoke on this topic back in 91. He passed away in 94. He spoke of this in 1991 in the Rebbe's weekly Torah teaching about Parshat Behar Bechukotai, and the Rebbe gives a reference from the book of Raziel, the angel. We discussed Raziel HaMalach, right? We've discussed this book plenty of times. It is the book that Adam received from the angel Raziel. The word Raz means secret, Raziel, right? In other words, he's handing Adam hidden secrets as he was being expelled from the Garden of Eden to help him kind of cope and deal with this world. The Holy One, blessed be He, sent Raziel the angel to reveal to Adam secrets that will give him the strength to endure the pain and suffering for being expelled and of the long exile. It's almost 6,000 years to be exact. There is written in the book of Daniel 12:2 regarding the resurrection of the dead. Again, this is all from the Rebbe. And many who sleep in the dust of the earth will awaken, these for eternal life and those for disgrace, for eternal abhorrence. Verabim mishne admat afar yakitzu. Okay, that's really what this is. Verabim, many, but also the great, meaning the greats. Rav is many, multitudes, but Rav is also an important, right? Amrav. Verabim yeshne admat afar, those who sleep in the dust of the earth. Yakitzu, lehakitz, from the word ketz. Ketz means the end. We'll also see it later on here. Yakitzu, in other words, their sleep will be done. Vayaketz mishnato, like Jacob woke up from his sleep. Okay? Who are these yeshenei admat afar? Who are those who are asleep? These are the righteous, like we said, the Rav, the Rabbim. And when do they come? When are they awakened? Rabbi Yehuda says 210 years. Rabbi Yitzchak says 214 years. What is that gematria of? Gematria of Redu. What is Redu? Redu, Reish Daled Vav. It means descend. When God told Jacob to descend to Egypt, that Redu, gematria, is 214 years. Okay? Just keep that in mind. We'll focus on this later. So these are the two opinions of the occurrence of this event. 210, 214. How do we plug in these numbers, right? But like in Daniel's timeline, we need to know where exactly to put these in. So like we said, the world was created to stand for 6,000 years. That's the 6,000 years of exile. Then we enter into the 7th millennia of the Messianic era. So we have 6 days of creation every day, 1,000 years, 6,000 years, Shabbat. Another 1,000 years of Shabbat. Me'ein olam haba. And so, where do we put in this figure? According to the later opinion, which is 210, meaning 6,000 years minus 210 brings us to the year 5790. Our current year is 5785. Essentially saying that in 5 years from now is the latest that the resurrection of the dead will begin. It comes in stages, but the first resurrection already in 5 years' time. I know. Once these sources were brought up and introduced to current Chabad rabbis, as well as other great rabbis of our time, they were astounded wait a minute, how did we miss this? Because again, it's so far away in 1991, we're not where we were today, right? If this was brought up today, we'd be like, oh, well, clearly. But the Rebbe actually gave this date back in 91 as one of his thousands, if not tens of thousands of teachings. How no one opened up the sources and references to check what was said, they were astounded by this. Like we've been seeing for years now, specifically regarding the book of Daniel, that the closer we get to the time of the end, like we said, slowly but surely God will begin to allow this information to be revealed to the world. We're reading the same thing that they have been reading for 2,500 years, right? But only now, when it's actually relevant, the same text will all of a sudden pop out. The understanding is open from above, and there we go. It's now, because it could not have been any other time. So remember, nothing we learn is new. We could be staring at the answer in our face our entire lives. But the moment that God decides it's time for us to know, for the sake of encouragement and to give us a chance to focus, obviously, he opens our understanding so we can receive it. And so we do. The Chabad rabbi said that when the Rebbe gives a date or time, he is the one who establishes it and makes it so. In other words, what he says, that's when it is. He establishes now a fact in the universe. And this is nothing new, as we can learn this not only from the Tanakh, but from our sources, like we last class with Joshua. Joshua said something and God made it so. Shemesh begivon dom ve'yareach be'emek ha'elon. Sun, you're over there. Moon, you're over there. As in the luminaries that God created on the fourth day. And God's like, yeah, let it be so. Because the tzaddik spoke. So our sources and from the sages and thousands of years from the Torah Navim Tuvim, we see this. This is a matter of fact. Hatzadik gozer v'akadosh baruch hu mekayem. The righteous gives a decree, and the Holy One, blessed be He, fulfills it. We discussed this in the last class, I believe. I think either Calling All Jews or Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. The righteous requests are always fulfilled because they are the will of God. So the Rebbe's statement becomes a reality. This is the base point for the establishment of this date, and now the narrator is going to connect the dots for us. There was a shiur given by Rabbi Yoram Abergil about the Chafetz Chaim, who famously addressed the 3 world wars even before the first one began. He said, the First World War is going to be very, very difficult. The second one is going to exceed the difficulty of the first one by crazy amounts. And then he also talked about the third. He goes, the third, like, that's it. That's the final world war. It's going to be the war to end all wars, just like they said about the first. Okay, but this one, in this regard, it's after the second, and he's actually giving us something. So again, this was said by the Chafetz Chaim. The second would be much more difficult than the first, as it was. And then after the Second World War, this is what he says, there would be a counting of 10 full Shemitah cycles, after which Mashiach will come. Just by hearing this, I'm like, okay, so 70 years after World War II, from 1945, that's not what he said. Meaning the end of every 6th year, that's when the Shemitah cycle begins, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like Shabbat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Motzei Shabbat, Sunday starts, that's when we start counting. Full Shemitah cycles. So what he was saying was, after the war ends, which was in 1945, the cycle had already just begun. So we have to wait until that cycle ends, and from that time to count a full 7 Shemitah cycles, which means the count would be from the end of the next cycle, which was in September 1952. 1952, Rosh Hashanah of 5712, Hebrew calendar. Then add the 7 full cycles from that date, giving us 70 years, right? And you have the year 2022. After 2022, the 11th cycle begins, and that 11th cycle represents the 7-year countdown to the resurrection, meaning within these 7 years, that's when everything takes place. Now, so in other words, after 2022, 2023, what happened in 2023? What happened exactly after the Ptakim came down and the judgment came out into the world? October 7th, right? Which means that clearly the process has begun exactly how we said it, exactly according to the timeline. Now remember, the Chafetz Chaim said this over 100 years ago, before all the world wars. The Or HaChaim said, regarding Parashat Tazria in Leviticus 12:2, it says, Isha ki tazria ve'alda zachar ve'tam'a shiv'at yamim. If a woman conceives and gives birth to a male, she shall be unclean for 7 days. This is alluding to Gog and Magog, which lasts 7 years. It's not just like a battle. It is a time period. This time period is 7 years. And this is what started back in 2022, which brings us 7 years forward to the year 2029, or 5790 in the Hebrew calendar, giving us exactly 210 years before the year 6000. Fascinating. Now we know that the final redemption will mirror the first redemption, right? Meaning, in order to know what is coming, we simply need to look and investigate the Exodus, as we have been for years now. Again, the Acharit Kereshit teaching, the End from the Beginning series on the channel, is really all about that in great detail. So from Exodus 3:13 to 14, it says, "And Moses said to God, Behold, I come to the children of Israel, and I say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they said to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? In whose name am I coming, God?" Right? God said to Moses, Eheye asher eheye. What is eheye? I will be. Ani eheye. I will be what I will be, he said. And so, in other words, that's the name. But then he says, so shall you say to the children of Israel, this I'm telling you, Moses. But what you're going to tell them now in this time, Eheye has sent me to you. Eheye shelachani elechem. Now, so where's Eheye shelacheh, right? Did you catch the moment? I hope so. God is giving Moses the name by which they will be redeemed. Eheye asher eheye. However, that is only the name that he gives Moses over there, right? To give to the children of Israel back then, there is one Eheye. Eheye sent me. Where is the other Eheye? In Judaism, we understand, it's interesting, I see where you're going with this, right? Good. The first and the last. We're making this connection. In Judaism, we understand the power of completion by the number of 10, or the multiplication of the number 10. 10 sayings of creation, the 10 sfirot, the 10 commandments, 10 trials, 10 descents of God, 10 red heifers, and so on. But there always has to be a 10 within a 10 within a 10. So we've learned that even from the 10 sfirot, there are the 10 sfirot within each sfirah, making them a total of 100. That is completion, that is perfection. The numerical value of the word eheye, eheye shelachani, as in eheye will take us out, is 21. 21 times 10, 210. 210 years were they in Egypt, right? And now you understand why God sent Moses with only one eheye for the first redemption, as he saved the second eheye for the last redemption. Amazing. God shortened the first exile from 400 years to 210 years, which the clock began to tick the moment Jacob descended, right? That's the redu, when that happened. That's why one of the opinions was 214 years. They're not that far off. And out of those 210 years, now, again, this is between the points of the teaching that I heard. I'm bringing you a bunch of other things that I've been working on personally for the last few years. So out of the 210 years, there were, how many years were they actually in bondage in that tough time that God said, and for 400 years they will be under supplication and bondage and all that stuff. How many years did they actually suffer in Egypt? It was between 86 and 87 years. Now, before that, there's a hint towards this. I'll just give you. I heard that, I forgot even where I heard this, but again, the reason we have 86 years is because Miriam was 6 years older than Moses. They named her Miriam because in the year that she was conceived, that's when the bitterness started to come. That's why her name is Mariam. Mar is bitter. So that's how she got her name. So we know it's somewhere between 86 and 87. Essentially from the birth of Miriam, but it started that year earlier that year. So if you say where it says Israel yatzu chamushim yatzu Yisrael min Mitzrayim, it said in the basic translation they were armed, but rather this is where we get that only a fifth of them, that 80% were gone and only 20% left. If you multiply like the fifth, 5 times 86, you get 430, meaning 430 years from when Abraham received the prophecy. And this is also why it says, and 430 years were Israel in Egypt. When that was not the case, but this gives us a hint as far as how those timelines fit in. So that's why we're going between 86 and 87. Again, we're talking within the difference of a year, half a year to a year difference. All of this is falling in our time. That's why all this is relevant. So, like we said, 86, 87 years. Before that, they were living well. And their status began to consistently drop since the death of Joseph and his brothers, the last one being Levi. We're going to be discussing in the next Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer teaching, and you'll see how when I started there, I got to this. So this one came out first. So we discussed Miriam, 86, 87. So who cares? Okay, wonderful. And now we understand why, because her name was bitter, because of the bitterness. Now, something else I was thinking regarding these dates. Why are these dates significant? As we know that it was what was is what will be, and the last shall mirror the first. So I was thinking, at one point in our most recent history, where the Jews were doing okay, let's say, in the world, in a land that is not their own. Obviously, I'm not talking about when the Jews came back to Israel, but in the world, and where they weren't being persecuted and weren't being killed off, right? At what point did that change? Kristallnacht, the most significant time of boom, overnight change. It started slowly beforehand, but that night, just Google Kristallnacht if you don't know what happened that night. At that night, all the Jewish shops in Germany were completely destroyed. They raided their homes. They started taking them out to the streets and shooting them. And it just this is where all the trouble started for Jews. Jews had to wear the patches. They could no longer walk on the sidewalks. They had to walk in the gutter. They were being persecuted and beaten up and spat on. And the stories that my grandfather was telling me. In any case, so Kristallnacht, that's the date that spoke to me, right? Which, not surprisingly, took place, get this, if you Google even the date, it took place on the day of Noah's flood, which is the 17th of Cheshvan. So in other words, in the eve of the 16th of Cheshvan, before the 17th, before the flood went full scale, that's when this started. And that date is coming up not next week, but the following week. So within 10, 11 days, something like that. The Gregorian date is November 11th, 1938. Add either 86 or 87 years to 1938, and you get 2024, 2025. Fits our timeline perfectly. The Jews began being placed into concentration camps. Then first there was the ghettos, then concentration camps around 1939, 1940, and began to be systematically exterminated between the years 1941 and 1942 until the end of the war, right, in 1945. But we're talking about the days that these things started. Adding these numbers of 86 or 87 years, and you get anywhere between the years 2025 and 2029, which is exactly 2010 years before the end. Now, I don't know if it means anything, though I suspect that it does, because we've had so many numbers and so many things all hitting between the years 2023 or 2022 and 2029. This 7-year stretch, we are currently in the Geulah. Do you see? Everything falls into this time now. Now, we'll obviously see what happens, but all these things, they're undeniable. There's too many dots to ignore, say coincidence. There is no such thing, even if there's two things that seem to have a correlation over there. There is another understanding from the book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 6, where it says, "How long will it be until the secret ends?" It's strange, not the best translation, but he says, "Vayomer la'ish lavush abadim," and he said to the man clad in linen, who was above the waters of the river, "Asher mima'al lemeimei hayeor," and he said to him, Daniel asked him, which is the man Gabriel, angel Gabriel, "Ad matai ketz hapelaot." Okay, so you should know this because we discussed this word ketz, like we said before, vayaketz mishnato, he woke up from his sleep. Ketz is the word end. He ended his sleep. They ended their slumber in the dust. We learned this. We said it. It was at least 5 or 6 times in the last chapter in Daniel. Okay? And it also appears in Parashat Miketz. And it was at the end, Shnatayim Yamim, of 2 years with Joseph. And when was that end? When was that ketz? It was on Rosh Hashanah that he was taken out. Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment. Rosh Hashanah could also very well be the resurrection of the dead or the day of judgment. We're not sure. Again, there are different cycles. Some say the resurrection of the dead is going to be in Nisan, which is actually a month of mercy to bring him up. But then there's the judgment, and that is the month of Tishrei, day of judgment. Okay, so in any case, why is this interesting? Because the word ketz has the numerical value of 190. If you remove the ketz, you shorten it. In other words, from the 400 years they were supposed to be in Egypt, you take off 190, you're left with 210. So to our question, what is ketz hapelaot, which is translated as secret end? The singular tense of pelaot is pele, wonder. That's what that is, right? In other words, something that we are not used to, something that was hidden, something that could have been revealed. As says in Micah 7:15 regarding the final redemption, which is comparable to the first. As in the days of your exodus from the land of Egypt, I will show him wonders. Ki me'etzetcha me'eretz Mitzrayim ar'enu niflaot. Here's that word again. The Rebbe Milubavitch would give biblical names to the years. I didn't know he did this, but it's very cool and it makes sense. For every decade beginning with the letter Aleph, right? So, for example, in the beginning of, if you were alive today, we are currently in Tafshin Pei Hey. Also a very significant year, by the way, because Pei Hey, what is Pei Hey? Peh, mouth. Talpiot, Telpiot. This is, I live in a place close to Talpiot in Jerusalem. It is the, Tel is a man-made like mound, right? Tel Aviv. In other words, it's been built on, and there you go. Piot, Peh. Where does the strength from Judah come? From his mouth, right? So when we cry to God this year, God's going to make us cry to him this year. He will answer us. So in any case, from this decade, if the Rebbe were alive, he would say that the year Tafshin Pei Aleph, he'd say Tehesh Nat Niflaot Ar'enu. May it be the year of wonders that we may see, just like we said, Ar'enu Niflaot. Tafshin Pei Bet, he would say Tehesh Nat Niflaot Bakol. It's all about the year of Niflaot. Ar'enu Bakol Aleph Bet and so on. May it be a year of wonders in everything that we do. But within every year, it was all about the Niflaot, the wonders, the hidden miracles that are revealed now, hinting at the answer within the question itself. Ad matai ketz haplaot, until when will be the end of these secret wonders? In other words, it's not exactly like that. In other words, when will the end of the hiddenness of these wonders be? We can't see it. Remember, we are in haster haster, panai mehem. I will surely doubly, quadruply and whatnot, hide my face from them. In other words, God is here, very much present. We are the ones that can't see him, right? It's not like he is hiding. He's hiding himself from us by putting the blinders on our eyes, but slowly but surely they are being removed, and we have many people doing tshuva. So according to Micah, we need to see them as God is going to clearly reveal them. The answer is at the end of the Tafshin Peis, which is in 5 years, which is exactly 210 years before the year 6000. Now, there's another specific hint for this time and this decade. That is the Tafshin Peis, specifically with the letter Pei, which is the 80s. Okay, and it starts with Tafshin Pei Aleph, which also spells Ashpot. And this is directly written in Psalms 113 regarding the final redemption. Mekimi me'afar dal, me'ashpot yarim evyon. He lifts the pauper from the dust, from the dung heap. He raises up the needy. We are the needy. Ashpot, ashpa, pach ashpa is a garbage can. Shar ha'ashpot, the dung gate in Jerusalem. Okay, so in other words, starting from then, we are currently in that timeline. To seat him with princes and the princes of his people, he seats the barren woman of the house as a happy mother of children. Hallelujah. And also in Psalms 90 verse 10, the days of our years because of them are 70 years. and if with the increase, 80 years. ימי שנותינו בהם 70 שנה, ואם בגבורות 80 שנה. So this is a bad translation in English, as the word to focus on before the 80 is gvurot, mighty deeds, gvura, right? Judgment, might. Mighty deeds of who? Psalms 106:2. Who can narrate the mighty deeds of the Lord? Mi yamalel gevurot Adonai. Now, gevura, like we said, this is judgment. And it comes not over here with the name Elohim, which represents judgment, but rather with the Yud Kei Vav Kei representing complete mercy. Gvurot, the gvurot of the merciful one, meaning just like our days in Egypt, the judgment came upon our enemies, but mercy came upon Israel simultaneously. This is the decade that God will raise up from the dung heap, Mashpot Yarim Evyon, right now. The final redemption has already begun within the last 5 years, as we've seen with COVID, aka Corona, which means crown. As in, the first thing you see as the child is being born, the top of its head, it's called, the mother is crowning right now. We know the Torah as well as the sages use the examples of giving birth as the redemption process. Month after month can also translate to year after year. As the closer we get to the delivery, the contractions begin, each being more painful than the next as the duration comes closer while the intensity and pain becomes greater. Even as the crown is revealed, the final few pushes need to take place. This is a painful time, a trying time, and potentially a dangerous time because we, Israel, are at our most vulnerable. This is by design. We will not be able to get around this. Like we said, God is going to break the pride of our strength, which is likely our military. I don't know how that's going to look like, but we need to not be able, by default, to rely on anybody. Right now, look at what our army's doing. It's not our army, it's God. Yes, there are soldiers that are doing this, but who is directing? Who is commanding? Who is in charge of every rocket and missile flown? It's all God, and we have to give kavod to God for this. Otherwise, by my might and by my power, and pride comes before the fall, this we know. All right? This is the moment where we have no one to rely upon. We're going to get to that moment, except our Heavenly Father. So again, expect this to happen. This is only for our goodness. We need that to be removed from us because our base human natures is dependent upon someone else coming to save us. And it's natural almost. Who would have like, oh, thank God, at least we have an army. But what happens if we don't? It's only God, right? Okay. Do not be distracted, I'm telling you right now, by what is happening in the world. And do not think for a moment that the President of the United States or the President-elect of the United States is going to save Israel or the Jews or America or anything. That is heresy. Nobody is saving Israel except for God. Everything that God does is for the sake of giving us the opportunity to strengthen our faith, as well as great encouraging mercies along the way, like revealing these niflaot that have been hidden for thousands of years that are relevant for our time and our day. Indeed, we have much to look forward to. This is it, people. We're in it. Mashiach is coming in our time, in our day. We must hold on and not get distracted by the world and all the noise coming from it. And make no mistake, the closer we get to that time. Now, what has to happen before the resurrection of the dead? Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, the building of the temple, World War III, the final Gog and Magog, the destruction of all the nations turning and coming into Israel. All these things have to take place. And then in 5 years, the resurrection of the dead. So we are in it, right? We even gave you already beforehand the years of 2024 and 2025. And then, according to Daniel's timeline, 2026, the building of the temple. So all these things make perfect sense. So, again, don't get distracted by everything pay attention, but don't get distracted by it. as that is its function, to see who gets pulled in which direction and who gets swept up in what. Obviously, there are more trials to come because the final berur, the, how shall we say, the differentiation, the drawing of the line, the separation, that still has to take place, and we will discuss that. And that is to separate who is Israel and with Israel and who is not. So, stay strong, chazak ve'ematz, and God willing, I'll see you all on the other side, okay? That's very exciting. So I guess we'll still wait to see, if Iran makes good on their word. They still haven't attacked Israel. They keep changing their dates. Later on, when I recorded that, they said in the morning that they're going to attack before the election. Later on that evening, they said, after I already released the video, they said they're going to attack after the election. What can we do? We're waiting, but still people are living their lives. This is Israel. Are we waiting for a worse attack than the first two? Obviously, but hey, what can we do? We're not going to be sitting in fear. We are in the land of Israel. Where else are we going to go? Nowhere. We don't want to go anywhere. So this is it. In any case, please continue to keep Israel in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you, as always, for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.